By early 1933, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow had robbed 5 banks in 8 weeks across Texas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. The public saw glamour, young lovers with fast cars and faster guns, thumbing their noses at the law during the worst years of the Depression. The FBI saw something else, a body count climbing toward double digits, 9 dead by April, including 4 police officers. But what made Clyde impossible to forget was simpler than any headline. It was the cap. A gray wool driver's cap he wore in every photograph, every witness description, every wanted poster. Fans sent letters asking where to buy one. Newspapers paid Bonnie $50 for photographs of Clyde wearing it. Nobody asked why he never took it off. Nobody knew that during his escape from Eastham Prison Farm in January, he'd sewn coordinates into the brim, a burial site only he could find. The apartment at 3,347.5 Oak Ridge Drive in Joplin, Missouri, looked ordinary from the street. 2 bedrooms above a garage, rent paid monthly in cash by tenants who kept strange hours. From April 1st to April 12th, 1933, 5 people lived there. Clyde, Bonnie, Clyde's brother Buck, Buck's wife Blanche, and a teenage wheelman named W.D. Jones. Neighbors reported loud music at midnight, expensive cars that changed every few days, visitors who never stayed long. What they didn't report, because they didn't see it, was Clyde's morning ritual. Every single day, he'd sit at the kitchen table and run his fingers along the inside of his cap's brim. 3 times minimum. Bonnie noticed. She asked why once. He told her, insurance policy. On April 12th, an anonymous tip reached Joplin Police Headquarters. Barrow gang hiding at the Oak Ridge Apartments. By midnight, Detective Tom DeGraff had assembled his team. By 3 a.m., they were in position outside the building, watching shadows move behind curtained windows. The cap sat on the kitchen table, 6 feet from where Clyde slept in a wooden chair. The cap came from Sanger Brothers department store in Dallas, purchased on January 15, 1933, exactly 1 week after Clyde's bloody escape from Eastham Prison Farm. He'd walked in wearing stolen clothes and ordered it special. Gray wool, leather sweatband, wide brim. The clerk remembered him because he paid $45 in cash and asked for rush delivery. What the clerk didn't know. 3 weeks later, Clyde returned to a tailor shop in West Dallas and had coordinates sewn into the lining with black thread. 32 degrees, 34 minutes north. 93 degrees, 29 minutes west. A field outside Gibbsland, Louisiana, where he'd personally buried $90,000 in cash. Money from 7 successful bank robberies between February and March 1933. Money he planned to retrieve after one last year of freedom, he told Bonnie, also sewn inside, a folded note in Clyde's cramped handwriting. If I die, Bonnie gets the coordinates. Dig 6 feet north of the oak tree. Nobody else in the gang knew, not Buck, not Blanche, not W.D. Jones, who drove Getaway on 4 different jobs. The cap wasn't superstition. It was a treasure map worn in plain sight, photographed by newspapers, circulated on wanted posters nationwide. Every time Clyde touched the brim, he was checking that his future was still there. Detective Tom DeGraff received the anonymous tip at 6 p.m. on April 12th and spent the next 6 hours confirming it through police informants and surveillance. By midnight, he had visual confirmation. Clyde exited the apartment twice that evening, both times wearing the gray cap, both times touching its brim before sliding into a black Ford V8 parked on the street. DeGraff radioed his observations to the FBI field office in Kansas City. The response came back urgent and specific. Capture alive if possible. Barrow knows locations of hidden bank money totaling 6 figures, but DeGraff wasn't the only one watching the apartment. A man from Chicago's outfit had driven down from Kansas City that same afternoon. 3 Missouri bank jobs had crossed into territory the syndicate considered theirs. The order from up north was simple: find out where Barrow keeps the take, recover what's ours. 3 separate forces circling one target. FBI wanted him for justice. Joplin police wanted glory. The mob wanted cash. None of them knew the answer was literally sitting on top of Clyde Barrow's head, stitched into fabric that had survived 8 months of running, shooting, and sleeping in stolen cars. By 2 a.m. on April 13th, DeGraff had positioned 5 officers in unmarked positions around the building. The raid was scheduled for 3:45 a.m., early enough to catch them sleeping, late enough that neighbors wouldn't interfere. DeGraff told his team, routine arrest, surprise entry, minimal force. He expected Clyde to surrender when he saw the odds. At 2 a.m. on April 13th, Clyde couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the apartment's kitchen with the cap in both hands, running his thumb along the stitched coordinates he'd memorized 3 months earlier. Bonnie found him there 20 minutes later, asked what was wrong. "Something's coming," he said, a line W.D. Jones would repeat to investigators years later. "I can feel it in my bones." She asked about the cap, why he never let it out of his sight even when sleeping. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "This is our ticket out someday, when we're ready to stop running." She didn't press for details. By 3 a.m., Clyde had dozed off in the kitchen chair, the cap resting on the table beside a half-empty bottle of bootleg whiskey and a loaded .45 automatic. Bonnie lay in the bedroom, staring at ceiling cracks, listening to the peculiar silence that settles over cities in the hour before dawn. Then she heard it. Car doors closing outside, careful footsteps on gravel, the slow creak of someone ascending the exterior stairwell. The cap was 6 feet from Clyde's outstretched hand when the first knock rattled the apartment door. He grabbed his pistol before he grabbed anything else. The cap tumbled to the floor as the door exploded inward. DeGraff expected a textbook arrest. Surprise them at first light, take them before they're fully awake, collect the headlines. He knocked twice, announced, "Police!" in a voice designed to wake and intimidate, then kicked the door in with his boot heel. Clyde fired first, 2 shots through the door frame that sent DeGraff diving sideways into the wall. Officers stormed in from both the front entrance and the back bedroom window. The apartment became a chaos of muzzle flashes and shouting. Gunfire lit the darkness like camera bulbs popping in sequence. A bullet caught Clyde's center mass, spun him completely around, dropped him beside the kitchen table in a spreading pool of his own blood. His cap lay 2 feet away, already spattered with red droplets. DeGraff radioed dispatch through the noise. "Barrow down! Repeat, suspect Barrow is down!" He thought it was over, but Bonnie Parker was already moving with the practiced speed of someone who'd escaped a dozen raids before this one. She grabbed the Browning automatic rifle from its hiding place under the bed, braced the weapon against the window frame, and opened fire on the officers regrouping below. 47 rounds in 90 seconds. The bar's distinctive hammering sound echoed across 3 city blocks. Detective Wes Harriman caught 3 bullets in the chest and collapsed on the pavement. Constable Harry McGinnis took 1 round to the head and died instantly. What DeGraff had planned as a routine arrest had just become the deadliest shootout in Joplin's history. While the surviving officers scrambled for cover behind their patrol cars, Bonnie was already dragging Clyde toward the door, leaving a long red smear across the linoleum floor. Clyde lay on his back, blood spreading beneath him in an expanding circle that reached the table legs. The cap was 2 feet from his right hand. Bonnie didn't think, didn't plan. She grabbed the cap first, stuffed it into her coat pocket, then hooked both arms under Clyde's shoulders and began dragging him toward the apartment's rear exit. His boots scraped across the floor, leaving red streaks on the cheap linoleum. Buck Barrow and W.D. Jones laid suppressing fire from the back bedroom, pinning the 3 surviving officers behind their vehicles. You could hear the metal-on-metal ping of bullets hitting patrol car doors. Bonnie hauled Clyde down the exterior stairs, his head bouncing on each wooden step, his breath coming in shallow, liquid gasps. She shoved him into the passenger seat of their Ford V8, climbed behind the wheel, turned the ignition. The engine roared to life. Ahead, 2 patrol cars blocked Oak Ridge Drive in a makeshift barricade. Bonnie looked at Clyde slumped against the door, looked at the gap between the 2 vehicles, maybe 3 feet of clearance. She made her decision in half a second, floored it. The V8's modified engine screamed as she accelerated toward the barricade, 65 miles per hour through a space barely wide enough for the car's frame. Metal shrieked against metal. Both side mirrors exploded. The rear window shattered from a final burst of police gunfire. Then they were through, tearing down Oak Ridge Drive into the pre-dawn darkness with the engine howling and Clyde's blood pooling on the floorboard. The cap sat on the dashboard where Bonnie had tossed it, blood still dripping from the gray wool onto the car's fabric interior. She didn't look at it. She just kept her foot on the accelerator and her eyes on the road ahead, watching for the turn that would take them out of Missouri. 4 miles outside Joplin city limits, Clyde stopped breathing. Bonnie saw his head slump forward against the passenger window, watched his chest go completely still. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck. No pulse. Nothing. She kept driving with one hand on the wheel, the other slapping his face, screaming his name into the car's interior. "Clyde! Clyde, wake up!" She pounded on his chest with her fist, felt his ribs give slightly under the impact. The car drifted across the center line. She jerked it back. 40 seconds passed. 40 seconds of clinical death that a doctor they'd kidnap at gunpoint 6 hours later would confirm from the wound pattern and timeline. Then Clyde gasped, a ragged choking sound, like a man surfacing from deep water. The bullet had missed his heart by exactly 2 inches, the doctor would later explain. Any closer, and he'd have died in the apartment. Any further, and the shot would have passed clean through without major damage. As Clyde coughed blood onto his white shirt, the cap fell from the dashboard to the floor between his feet. In the dome light's pale glow, Bonnie saw something she'd never noticed in 8 months. Paper folded tight, visible through a gap in the brim's stitching. She didn't reach for it, didn't read it. She just kept driving, one hand on the wheel, the other pressed against Clyde's chest to feel his breathing, however shallow. They reached a farmhouse safe house outside Carthage by 5 a.m. Clyde drifted in and out of consciousness, while Bonnie cleaned his wound with whiskey and torn bedsheets. When he finally fell into real sleep, she picked up the cap for the first time since stuffing it in her pocket during the escape. Blood had soaked through the gray wool, stiffened the fabric into something that felt more like cardboard than cloth. Bonnie turned the cap over in both hands, examining it under the farmhouse's single electric bulb. She found the stitching, small, deliberate, hidden beneath the leather sweatband, where no casual observer would ever notice. Inside, a piece of paper folded into a tight square. She pulled it free, unfolded it carefully. Coordinates written in Clyde's handwriting. 32 degrees, 34 minutes north. 93 degrees, 29 minutes west. And beneath the numbers, a single sentence. Bonnie, this is our future. Dig 6 feet north of the oak. She read it 3 times, trying to understand what it meant. He'd planned for his death. He'd prepared her escape. The cap also held something else she hadn't noticed in the chaos. A bullet fragment lodged deep in the brim's fabric. The doctor they kidnapped from his home in Carthage examined it later that morning, shook his head in what looked like professional disbelief. This cap saved his life, the doctor said, holding the fragment up to the light. The bullet hit the brim first, angled down instead of straight through. 2 inches to the left, and it would have gone through his skull. Bonnie put the cap back on Clyde's head when he woke around noon. His first words, spoken in a voice barely above a whisper. "My cap. Where's my cap?" She handed it to him without mentioning what she'd found inside. He pressed it against his chest, like a man reuniting with something sacred, then placed it carefully on the nightstand where he could see it. The coordinates and the note went back into their hiding place in the brim. Neither of them mentioned it again for 13 months. By April 14th, Joplin police had secured the apartment and cataloged everything the Barrow gang left behind. Camera equipment worth $300, undeveloped film rolls, handwritten poems in Bonnie's distinctive cursive, love letters between Bonnie and Clyde that would later be published in newspapers nationwide. Photographs, including the image of Bonnie posing with a cigar clenched between her teeth. The photograph that would become the most famous Depression-era portrait of female criminality. She actually hated smoking, would later tell a reporter. The cigar was a prop, a joke for Clyde's camera, but that photograph defined her forever. What police didn't find, the cap. The cap was still with Clyde, blood-stained and bullet-torn, riding north toward Kansas in the back seat of a stolen Chevrolet. The FBI issued updated orders on April 15th. Capture priority number 1, Clyde Barrow. Reason given in the internal memo. Suspect knows locations of hidden bank money, possibly exceeding $100,000. Every gas station attendant, every diner waitress, every motor court clerk in 4 states received updated wanted posters. The cap was circled in red ink with a typewritten note. If you see this cap, call FBI immediately. Do not approach. Suspect is armed and extremely dangerous. The Chicago outfit put out its own message through different channels. $10,000 cash bounty for Clyde Barrow, delivered alive and able to talk. They had questions about Missouri bank jobs. Questions about where the money went, who had it now, whether Clyde had already spent it or hidden it somewhere they could recover it. 3 separate manhunts for one man. The coordinates sewn into his cap remained unread by everyone except Bonnie. In May 1933, Texas Ranger Frank Hamer accepted the assignment that would eventually define his legend and end his career. His mandate, delivered personally by Texas Governor Ma Ferguson, track Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow, end their crime spree by any means necessary. Hamer was 50 years old, had killed more than 50 men in his career as a lawman, and had a reputation for patience. He didn't chase. He studied. He spent the first month doing nothing but reviewing evidence. Every photograph ever taken of Bonnie and Clyde, every witness account, every police report, every newspaper article. He noticed something nobody else had flagged. The cap appeared in 23 separate photographs spanning 8 months. Clyde wore it in bank surveillance footage, wore it in pictures Bonnie took for fun, wore it in images captured by witnesses during robberies, never took it off, even when sleeping in hot cars during Texas summers. Hamer's conclusion, written in his personal notes, That cap means something. Men don't wear the same hat for 8 months unless it serves a purpose. He visited Sanger Brothers department store in Dallas, interviewed the clerk who'd sold it. Learned only 50 caps had been made in that particular style. One had been custom ordered by a man who paid in cash and gave the name C. Barrow. Not random, intentional. Hamer began studying the backgrounds in photographs, trees, fence posts, road signs, architectural details. He was looking for patterns, repeated locations, anything that might reveal where Bonnie and Clyde felt safe enough to linger. By summer 1933, he'd identified 3 areas they returned to regularly. One was Texas, near Clyde's family. One was Oklahoma, near Bonnie's relatives. One was Louisiana, specifically the region around Gippsland and Arcadia, where neither of them had any known connections. That last one interested him most. Why return to a place with no family, no support network, no logical reason? Hamer requested topographical maps of the Gippsland area, began surveilling it personally during autumn 1933. He was looking for anything: a safe house, a contact, a hiding spot. What he was really looking for, though he didn't know it yet, was a field with an oak tree at coordinates 32 degrees 34 minutes north, 93 degrees 29 minutes west. He came within 2 miles of it 3 separate times between September and December. Never quite found it. The cap kept it secret, while Bonnie and Clyde kept running, kept robbing, kept killing anyone who got between them and freedom. By early 1934, their body count had reached 15. Hamer's surveillance had narrowed to a 5-mile radius. He was close. He just needed them to make one mistake. On the morning of May 23, 1934, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow drove a stolen Ford V8 down a dirt road outside Gippsland, Louisiana. They were headed toward the coordinates Clyde had sewn into his cap 16 months earlier. 3 miles to the buried money. 3 miles to $87,000 that could have bought new identities, passage to Mexico, a future that didn't end in blood. Frank Hamer and 5 other lawmen, Texas Rangers, Louisiana officers, federal agents, waited in brush beside the road. Hamer had finally found the pattern, had traced Bonnie and Clyde's movements to this exact area, this exact road, had set up an ambush with a local man's truck positioned as bait. When the Ford came around the curve at 9:15 a.m., Hamer gave the signal. They opened fire without warning, 130 rounds in 16 seconds. The Ford's windows exploded into powder. Steam erupted from the radiator. Both front tires shredded. When the shooting stopped, Bonnie Parker was dead, slumped against the passenger door with 17 bullets in her body. Clyde Barrow was dead, half out of the driver's seat with 25 bullets in his. He was still wearing the cap. 8 new bullet holes had shredded the gray wool, blood soaked through fabric already stained from the Joplin raid. Hamer pulled the cap from Clyde's head, examined the brim, and found what he'd suspected for months. Coordinates stitched in black thread, barely visible beneath the leather sweatband. That afternoon, he drove to the exact location, 32 degrees 34 minutes north, 93 degrees 29 minutes west, and dug 6 feet north of a massive oak tree. 3 feet down, his shovel hit metal, a locked box buried in red Louisiana clay. Inside, $87,000 in cash, still wrapped in bank paper. Also inside, a 3-page letter from Clyde to Bonnie, handwritten in pencil. "We could have stopped any time," the letter began. "We could have dug up the money and disappeared to Mexico or Canada or anywhere they'd never look. But stopping meant admitting we were wrong. And Bonnie, I'd rather die right than live wrong. The cap sits in a glass display case now, preserved behind climate-controlled glass at a Texas Ranger museum. Faded gray wool, dark bloodstains that never washed out. 16 bullet holes total, 8 from the final ambush, 8 from previous shootouts. Inside the brim, if you look closely, you can still see the coordinates stitched in black thread. 32 degrees, 34 minutes north, 93 degrees, 29 minutes west. Pointing to a field less than 3 miles from where Bonnie and Clyde died. The money was returned to the banks. The letter was archived. The photographs hang in history books. But the cap endures. The ordinary object that held an extraordinary secret for 16 months. Clyde thought it was his insurance policy, his ticket out, his future. Instead, it became the map that led his hunters to the exact spot where he'd planned to start over. Same field, same coordinates. The cap survived. The man who wore it didn't.